Well, in this almost riotous exchange between basically the Conservatives and Tiff Macklem, the Bank of Canada governor, because there's the idea that's been floated that Tiff is going to run for leadership if Trudeau ever leaves. So there's a lot of political background besides the point that this is the mortgage rates and a very heated topic. It's interesting as hell. Enjoy.
We make a best estimate of the
Exactly.
fiscal
So
plan.
we know
So
that
those
it's
are
already $6
built
billion
into our
over.
projections.
The budget
Point
is
of order,
$6 billion
Mr. Chair.
over.
Point of order,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
MP Zerowitz,
I'm very
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
The governor was not able to answer the last question or this question. Nobody who's listening would actually be able to understand the response.
No, MP Hallen, please, no crosstalk. Let's just allow the governor to finish his answer to your question. If you take all the spending plans of government for the next year, they imply growth in spending of 2.5%.
Fair enough. Yeah, we've heard that for the third time. So
MP Hallen,
what I'm
please allow the governor to finish his answers, please,
So-
to your
Point of order.
questions.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Point of order.
My understanding is that at these committees, because we have such limited time, that the witnesses are encouraged to use a similar length of time in responding to the question as it took to pose the question. Mr. Hallan is asking yes or no questions. I think it's fair.
That is not correct,
if
MP
my
Scheer.
colleague
That is
trying
not
to
that is not
focus
correct.
in
What you're
on
saying is
getting
not
actual-
correct, and the governor should have an opportunity to answer.
It's not just inflation, Mr. Speaker. It is a focus that we have to have to continue to invest in Canadians.
Well, MP Scheer completely gets into it with them here. It's a 6-minute exchange, and it's very enlightening.
Because obviously
Enjoy.
inflation is a massive issue for Canadians and the interest rates that are rising to fight it. So when we talk about monetary policy and fiscal policy, just so I'm clear and everyone watching is clear, monetary policy, that's you. That's the Bank of Canada. You have tools at your disposal. You have interest rates. You have quantitative easing and tightening. But that's your department, I guess, is the same.
Right.
Okay. Fiscal policy, that would be the government. That would be the government spending decisions, taxation, borrowing, all those types of things. So that's fiscal policy. Okay. So when you say that you control the monetary policy and one of your primary objectives as the Bank of Canada, and this is from your website, says we influence the supply of money circulating in the economy using a monetary policy framework to keep inflation low and stable. So that's your main goal, is to hit that target on inflation. So while you're using your tools, raising interest rates and tightening up the money supply, now you're saying that the fiscal policy, the government's policy, its spending policy, is not being helpful. Did I understand that correctly?
What I said was, over the past year, government spending at all levels, federal and provincial, looks, by our estimates, has grown at less than 2%, so has not been getting in the way of getting inflation down. Looking forward, our estimate is that it will grow slightly faster than supply. And against that background, yes, it could begin to make it harder to get inflation down.
So it's going to undo, and I take your point about the past is the past. We're here to advise the government.
On the
We're
future.
here to provide submissions for the fall economic statement and the budget. So going forward, increases in spending will make your job more difficult, will undo some of the work that you've done with interest rates.
It will definitely make it more difficult to get inflation down if all that spending is spent.
Thank you very much for that clarification. If you got to the target rate sooner, if you're able to get inflation down with these interest rate hikes that are affecting all Canadians with any kind of debt, mortgage, line of credit, if you got to that sooner, would you be in a position where you could start to consider lowering interest rates?
Yes, if inflation, the sooner we see clear evidence that inflation is headed back towards the 2% target, the sooner we can start discussing reducing interest rates. We don't need to wait until it's back to 2%, but we need to wait until we're clearly on a path till 2%.
And can you just remind the committee what your target is?
2%.
2%, okay. So you've already acknowledged that the carbon tax would be, you say 0.6% off inflation?
For 1 year.
Okay, but it is important to remember that inflation is cumulative, so it's not like you remove the carbon tax, inflation automatically pops up the year after that.
Well, prices are cumulative. Inflation is the rate of change of prices,
yes,
so
yes.
it
So the
falls
prices
out after
would,
a year.
Right. So I just think that's an important clarification. So do you have a target for government growth in terms of being helpful? You said the projected rate of government spending increases is unhelpful. Do you have a recommendation to the committee on where government spending growth could come in at, which would be more helpful?
Let me just be very clear. We have a big job. You have a big job. In fact, your job is a lot bigger than our job. You have a lot of priorities: healthcare, education, security, protecting the most vulnerable, and fiscal decisions are the decisions of government and Parliament.
If I could, because I'm very short on time.
In terms of,
I'm not asking you for tell us where to spend or how to spend, but just if you have a target growth rate.
So if, I think there's a few things you can look at, but
just looking for
I think
a
you want
ballpark
to
number.
look at
You could just allow the governor, please, to answer.
So if you're looking at the direct contribution of government goods and spending on goods and services, we think that the potential of the economy is growing at about 2%. So if it's growing less, at 2% or less, it's not adding undue inflationary pressures.
How much time do I have, Mr.
You got about 10 seconds,
10.
but go, yeah.
Okay, I'll cede my time to that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so P.S. Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Governor, for being with us today. I'll pick up where Mr. Scheer left off. You were just saying that spending below 2% would not be adding undue inflationary pressures. Governor, I believe you said something very similar last week at the press conference, and I quote, "If you look at government spending over the last year, it was below 2%. It does not look like it's been adding undue inflationary pressures over the last year." I understand that you continue to hold that position.
Yes. Story.